It's Georgia Raisman. I'm here on Front Up with one of my favorite people, RobRanney, and we're going to talk about all matters steamship and maybe some other stuff. But good morning, Rob. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. My favorite topic.
Oh, good. I bet it occupies a lot of your time,
It does, more than people realize.
Yep. So what's involved in being the head of the Steamship Authority? First off, most people, or many people, might not even know what the Steamship Authority is. It's this autonomous entity.
It is. It was set up by the state in 1960 to provide year-round service to the islands of Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. Up until that time, service was sketchy. People don't realize that there were times when, weeks at a time, there were no boats. Sometimes the schedule worked, sometimes it didn't, sometimes there were strikes, and so it got to the point where the state stepped in and said, these people live on an island, it's not their fault that they can't get back and forth all the time, we need to guarantee them something, and that's pretty much where the steamship came from.
So had it been provided by private groups before this?
That was another issue.
The equivalent of the High Line?
Exactly. So a private company would operate maybe July and August and then say, we don't want to do the wintertime, we're not going to make any money, so you're on your own. And that happened.
So when the Steamship Authority was set up, it was set up to be self-sustaining, profit-making? The state would underwrite it if it made a loss, or what?
There is no underwriting or subsidy from the state. It is basically a break-even operation. So all the money that the steamship takes in every year comes from passengers, comes from vehicles, and it's self-supporting in that way. So when things like maintenance and those kinds of costs go up, which they always seem to do, that money has to come from the people that are riding the boats.
And the service is to us and to Martha's Vineyard, and the representatives on the steamship board are?
So we have several. So there is one from Nantucket and one from Martha's Vineyard, and we each have a 35% vote. There's also one from Hyannis or Barnstable, one from Falmouth, and one from New Bedford, and each of those has a 10% vote. So theoretically, the islands have the majority and can get what they need to provide for their constituents.
And is this generally an amicable board?
It's very amicable. It's my role is a very diplomatic one, because I want to make sure that the Hyannis guy and I get along so that our needs are mutual, and we don't want to make them upset and say, we're going to limit the traffic coming through Hyannis, or we're going to limit the number of boats you can run, because that would not be good for us. So yes, it is a very diplomatic situation.
It's a very delicate situation.
It's very delicate.
Because there's all that the parking issues over in Hyannis, and a lot of private people involved in private levels of parking.
That's right, and the steamship will get blamed for overflow from the terminal for, why are there so many parking lots in Hyannis? They look terrible, but we need it because those people are coming here, and the town of Barnstable and gets some revenue from that, but it's a delicate situation because we don't want to overstep our bounds, and because that would not be good.
And you took this role over after your father had managed. It was with apparently just as delicate a diplomatic touch as you have for many years.
I learned a lot from him. He stepped in when he got on the board. It was right after Grace Grossman died in 2004, and there were some issues. There were the Vineyard and Nantucket weren't really getting along very well. Same with some of the mainland ports, and he stepped in and sort of smoothed things out diplomatically by working with everybody, and it's pretty much been smooth sailing since then.
You've also usually, up until very recently, had a really smooth management system and what looked like a really smooth maintenance system. And then last winter, it all seemed to get kind of
That's
blow up.
right, and I think a lot of that was, yes, it was good and smooth, but we were lucky for a long time, and we didn't have some of these breakdowns that we saw last spring on the Vineyard route mostly, and it just sometimes stuff happens and stuff breaks, and these boats are running 18 hours a day for 300 days a year before they have to be in a dry dock, and that's a lot to ask for a mechanical system, especially in the salt air and the conditions that they're out in all the time, and just the people getting on and off. It's maintenance wise, it's a nightmare.
So not a lot of redundancy in there. I mean, it's not like that you have a lot of extra boats that you can throw into the system when one
That's
doesn't
true.
go.
Or even extra parts. Sometimes what happened on the vineyard were things were breaking that there weren't spares for, or there wasn't a technician to just come, call up and come in. The guy was in Denmark or someplace because he's a specialist, and so it took time. It took time to get these things done. But things have smoothed over. The summer went very well, very smoothly. There weren't a lot of problems, and people seem to be sort of back to the, you sort of forget that the boats are constantly going, and you just take it for granted. And I think people are doing that again now.
Now, what did you see by way of traffic patterns? Were there a lot of extra people this year? A lot fewer people than were expected?
It was on our route. The walk-on passengers were up about 4%.
Is that typical year to year? Is that lower than
That's
usual?
that's a little bit. Well, I'll back up a little bit. Last year, because of the accident that we had with the fast boat, we had a decrease in passengers. So this bump, this 4%, is probably not really 4%. It's just last year was low, so we're sort of probably on par with what last year was.
And you, having put in the fast boat, I mean, all those years ago, but having the fast boat, is it draining a lot of people from the slow boat? Could you tell that, or?
Well, it did initially. Now it's full a lot, so it's actually helping the slow boat because you can't get on the fast boat now. So more people are riding the slow boat, and it's also an economic thing. The slow boat to walk on is about half price of what the fast boat is. So there are people that will take it just for that, despite that it takes 2 hours.
I have to say, I'm always impressed when you run extra boats for whatever reason, either because there's a failure in the large boat, or because there's a need, or because of weather issues. It's really, or for commercial reasons to get all that freight over that needs to get over.
And it's a challenge to do that. For example, last winter when we had the icing, boats were iced in the harbors and they couldn't leave, and in Woods Hole they were not. So we had a boat that we were able to a freight boat came from Woods Hole to Nantucket because it couldn't use the Hyannis Harbor.
Right.
So we had to organize fuel trucks who would normally go to Hyannis to drive to Woods Hole instead, get on that boat and come here. So we do have passengers that are included in that. So there, for the first time in many, many years, there are passengers that actually traveled from Woods Hole directly to Nantucket. But again, it's a challenge to do that because there are union rules or Coast Guard rules. The boats aren't always available, and if it's late at night, Hyannis doesn't want us running boats in the middle of the night. So there are challenges, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, that was almost an emergency. I mean, the
Right.
iced-in harbors and the fuel
Right.
issues.
Yeah,
In winters it gets it can become brutal.
Yeah, and so the current management team is very good about shuffling things around, coming up with alternative plans, thinking outside the box, and realizing and knowing that we are out in the middle of the ocean, and sometimes it's the only option.
The other thing that was on people's minds was the boat that ran up on the jetty.
Yes,
Was that 2 summers ago now?
it was in 2016. Yes,
2016. It was really pretty surprising. I mean, to everybody, with all of that electronic equipment, and plus
Right.
these were seasoned captains who knew that route.
That's right.
So what's up with that?
I don't have an explanation. The investigation is ongoing with the Coast Guard. They have not released any results yet. And they haven't given any indication of when that might be. Last time I was on this show, I said it could be imminent, and now it never hasn't happened yet. So I don't know.
And are those captains still working? At their-
One retired shortly thereafter. Another one is working, but he's not a captain; he's a pilot.
This must be very difficult for everybody involved.
Yeah. Well, I've spoken to him. He said it was the worst night of his life, and he has no explanation of how or why it happened. So it's I don't know what to say about that other than there are examples of when airplanes land on the wrong runway and things like that, and it's with the most modern electronic equipment, it's difficult to understand how that can happen, but sometimes it does, and I don't know what to say.
Well, I think we'll be very interested to see what the Coast Guard comes up
Absolutely.
with. I mean, I guess there can be perception issues. You look at something and you think you know what you're looking at, and you're looking at something different than what is
Absolutely,
perceived,
and
and you
I
act
wasn't
on that instead of.
correct, and I wasn't in the wheelhouse, so I don't know. But not being in their shoes, it's difficult to say. But you're absolutely right. I mean, at night it's windy, Maybe
The visual clues aren't there, and
That's
so you're
right.
just looking at instruments that that say what you may not say what you think they're saying.
And
for
as
whatever
familiar
reason.
as they are with the channels coming in and out, there could be a complacency factor, and they sort of think they're in one place and they're really not, or they're not actually watching the radar, and they're sort of looking outside for a buoy, and
Right.
it's a tough one.
A very,
And-
very scary event, and really, but that's the only time that anything like that has happened in the, 53-year history of these.
Well, we've had boats, some of our own boats crash together.
But I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's
years
not-
ago there was a freight boat on the Vineyard route that crashed into another boat. There have been other issues, but for the most part, there are between both islands. There are roughly 22 or 23,000 trips that happen every year.
Wow.
And if you go through a year with nothing, or even a couple of years with nothing happening, that's a pretty good safety record.
It's a very good safety record. The other thing I was thinking about was people have been suggesting that we need more amenities on boats. So somebody suggested you should have a little library, like a paperback library,
Yes.
a hardback. Let people drop off and pick up books.
Yes, and
We have lots of tourist giveaway things. You have maps, you have newspapers, a little shelf for books.
I think that's a great idea. I don't know. Every time one of these things comes up, it sounds like a great idea, and I start asking questions. Can we do this? Is it okay to do that? And invariably, there is something that comes up that stops the whole thing. So, maybe in this case, it's a sanitary issue. Are the books, where are the books coming from? Are they dirty? Did they come from the take it or leave it?
The issue is library. I mean, libraries have books
I
too,
agree,
right?
I
Nobody's
agree.
worried about, are they going to get bronchitis from picking up a book in
I
the
agree.
library?
But then it becomes a liability. So if you're on the steamship boat and you borrow one of these books and something, I don't know, happens to you, then are you going to sue the steamship because they put this beautiful library here?
Must have a very worried lawyer.
But these because it's a state, a public thing, there are other concerns as well. So I'm still looking into it.
Good. Then, so there's a there's a fare increase coming. So
There is.
What's the fare increase
The-
about?
well,
What's
it
it going to
hasn't-
amount to?
It hasn't been voted in yet. It's just a proposal, and there was an original proposal to increase summer-only fares for everybody, and also increase freight fares, which are for trucks. That's been scaled back a little bit so that if you're an excursion rate payer, which is if you're an island resident, you're not going to have any increase at all. In the new proposal. If you're an off-island resident or somebody who is starting in Hyannis, in the summertime you're going to see an increase. I think it's $25 each way,
Wow.
which is
That's a big jump.
It's a big jump, but we've tried to increase those fares more than the island fares, and in the past it hasn't deterred anybody from coming here. So it's big to us, but to somebody who's coming here,
Maybe
it
not
doesn't
so
seem
much.
to be a big
So is
deal.
that the current slow ferry fare one way from Hyannis is what, $36, something like that? Am I-
No, to walk on it's $18.50 each way.
Oh, well, so is that the one that would be increased by $25?
No, it's the
We're
vehicle.
talking about the fast. Oh, it's the vehicle.
It's the vehicle.
Okay.
Right.
So the vehicle right now is 225, is it, one way?
One way from Hyannis, correct. So that's going to increase to $250
Mhm.
each
So-
way.
So it's $500 round trip to
That's
bring your
right.
car.
Right.
Whoa.
Yeah. But if you're an excursion rate payer, like most island residents are, it's that price round trip because you're starting on
Starting and
Nantucket.
coming back from the island is
And
going to
that's-
stay the same.
That's going to stay the same.
So passenger rates are not going to be
They're
increased?
not going to be increased.
So we're talking about car rates only.
Car rates, but truck rates are going to
And
go
car
up.
and
So
truck rates.
the average truck rate is going up, I think, 12.5%, which is a big jump.
It is.
But most of the goods that are brought on trucks, everybody is a participant in. So the
Right.
truck goes to Stop and Shop, and everything is going to go up.
Right.
But and the philosophy behind a lot of the fare increases over the years with the steamship is we're at a level, we keep it there as long as possible, and then when we need to raise it, we'll raise it. So it could be 3 or 4 years before you see an increase, even though the inflation is still creeping up that entire time, and it's when you have the adjustment, you're at the rate that it would have been had they been increasing every year.
Right. When was the last
In
increase?
2015,
So we're 3 years in.
right?
It's a big jump.
It is a
I
big
mean, we
jump.
already face these huge prices from Stop and Shop, and part of it is blamed on the cost of getting the goods over here.
Right, and like I said earlier, all of the cost that the steamship has comes from the ratepayers and the trucks and the people, and it's unfortunate, but we do live on an island, and the cost to get stuff here is not ever getting cheaper. And
Why did you never not consider increasing individual passenger fares?
we like to lessen the impact on ordinary people, and there are a lot of people that, especially island residents, that use the fast boats and or even walk on the slow boats, and we thought the impact would be better on the summer visitor.
Well, summer visitor with car,
With car.
but there are
That's
summer
right.
visitors who are passengers who
Right.
don't come with cars.
That's right.
Well, it will be interesting to see. It's a pretty big jump, I think, both for cars and for
It is,
freight.
but like I said, if we had been increasing every year, we would be at that level now anyway. So, but that's a good point, because we're looking at whether it's better to increase a little bit every year or to just wait as long as you can and then bump it up. Another thing coming into factor for next year is fuel costs, and fuel costs this year are based on $50 a barrel for oil. We're at 70 or something today, so
Oh my goodness!
yeah, so we're going to see a huge increase in the steamship's fuel cost.
Oh, that is going to be a worry. Good Lord,
Yeah,
that's
the
a big
steamship,
jump.
it burns about 3 million gallons of fuel a year, and if you go up $1 or I mean, you do the math.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. So where do you see the steamship keeping its current level of service, or do you see it increasing the level of service at all?
It's based on traffic. So if traffic stays the same, the level of service will stay the same. And we've seen in years where economically things have come down, there may not be a need for as much service. And we don't want to run empty boats because it's going to cost all of us
Right.
more money. So that's something that we monitor closely.
So do you monitor it from the standpoint of trips from the fast ferry as well as
Yes, absolutely. Although the fast ferry, because it's only one boat, we're sort of at our limit of how many trips we can do a day or a season because of union rules and other Coast Guard rules. I mean, these guys can't.
What's the capacity of the fast ferry?
It's just under 400. It's 394 people.
And the Highlines fast ferry is the new fast ferry. The big one is much bigger. isn't
It's
it?
almost 500, but a lot of those seats are outside. So in the wintertime,
Effectively, it's about the same.
right.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Well, I think I remember hearing Walter Beinecke talk a long time ago about the capacity of the island to absorb people.
Right.
And how he would walk down Main Street, this is early on, and half of the people said to him, Mr. Beinecke, you've got to bring more people over here, my stores are suffering.
Right.
And the other half would be saying, Mr. Beinecke, you're bringing over too many people, they're throwing garbage in my front yard, I can't stand this crowd. How do you find that balance? Do you just feel you need to respond to demand, or do you feel there's a level that you can help regulate demand?
There's no regulating as far as the steamship goes, so it's a response to demand, and I think we reach a point where we can't run any more boats, so that's really the limiting factor. So when we're so full all the time, and we have to stop at 10 o'clock at night, for instance, the people that are left behind, that's the limit. So we'll seek that level at some point, and there'll be a balance, but we're probably close to it now.
Well, I think we probably all hope so, given the level of activity we saw this past summer, and certainly the level of car activity.
Right. The steamship does get a lot of heat for traffic, and there are a lot of people that say, why can't you just, take fewer cars? So, but how would that work? Is someone going to stand there and say, okay, you can go, but you can't go? So it's, and the steamship is a lot like a public highway in a sense. There's no there's no limiting factor. Everybody can use it. So,
Right. On top of which, even if you limit the number of private cars that come over, there are cars that are going to be rented out here. I mean, in a
Well,
way,
that's
that's a
true,
gift
too.
to the rental car companies.
well,
to
those cars
just-
have to get here somehow too.
Exactly. They get here and then they're used on the roads in any case. So that the car issue is not something you all can solve by yourselves.
That's
for
right.
sure. It's
That's
a
right.
much bigger policy issue than that.
And that discussion comes up periodically. Every year, I'm standing on Main Street in July, And I say, this is the worst traffic I've ever seen. But then the following year, I say the exact same thing, and it could be the same. It just always feels like there are more
Right.
cars and people and everything else.
Well,
But
go out and stand near the high school at those corners, and that'll be the
Right.
worst traffic you've
That's
ever
right.
seen. Certainly on Surfside Road, it's
Yeah.
going to be the worst. Well, I appreciate your coming, Rob. This is really always fun to talk to you.
You too.
And I look forward to hearing that. Look forward to getting that Coast Guard report sometime in the future. We
I do.
won't say imminently. But thank you for helping this whole thing run so well. I mean, I
Absolutely.
tell you, when you go down to the ferry terminal in the winter in a nor'easter and you see it empty, you realize how desolate and how distant we all are.
That's
and
right.
that organization is our lifeline, and it's just great that you keep it running as well as you do, all of you over there.
I appreciate it. And it's a tribute to the steamship to realize that people are sort of taking it for granted in a sense until it's not running because
Right.
of weather or some
Right.
other
So you
issue.
drive by
And then
there.
you're reminded that you're on an island.
Right.
And part of that isolation factor, part of the being cut off from the mainland factor is why we're here in the first place, or
Right.
most of us anyway.
Right.
I mean, that's what we live here for.
Right, right. Well, thank you for giving us the lifeline.
Absolutely.
Nice to see you. Thanks
You too.
for coming.
Thanks, Georgia.